Prabhuji is joining now. So in a minute or so. Hare Krishna, Mukunda Datta Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Dandavats. Jai Shri Prabhupada.
Sorry, I'm out of state.
Yeah, I'm out of state too. Out of my normal state.
Thank you so much for your valuable time, Prabhu. There's Mukunda Datta Prabhu's disciple of Srila Prabhupada, joined it very early on, I think 15 years old. Is con and is scholar, BBT editor, helping in various ways and preaching all over the world. Specifically living in Govardhan in Vrindavan Dham. We're very fortunate to have his association today. So let's hear from Prabhuji today. Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Vansha kalpatarubhyascha kripasindhubhya evacha paritanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namo. This being the occasion of, well, it's not actually Akshaya Tritiya yet. We have a couple of weeks to go, and Chandan Yatra as well. But that was the topic chosen for tonight's talk. So without any further ado, let me begin with Mangalacharanam. Om Jnana Timirantasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuranmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guroho Shri Yuta Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam Shri He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namosute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hare Priye Vansha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripasindhubhya evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Madhavirapi Gopalasmi Puryat Kripaya Yadi Tadaiva Sampaya Pikva Prishye Yustat Priyajanaha. We're talking about Akshaya Tritiya and Chandan Yatra. They kind of overlap every year. It's since time immemorial a very famous festival. I'll begin with Akshaya Tritiya, and we'll also talk about Chandan Yatra. So actually, we don't find that Srila Prabhupada mentions Akshaya Tritiya. In fact, maybe once. I have not been able to find very much about Akshaya Tritiya in Srila Prabhupada's books, neither in his letters, neither in his conversations or public lectures. Maybe it's there unrecorded, I don't know. But this is, at any rate, it's a festival or a holy day that's coming since time immemorial. It's pretty well attested. And Akshaya means, of course, in Sanskrit, imperishable or indestructible, that is to say something permanent. And Tritiya means just the third day. So this is the auspicious time. It's considered to be auspicious to begin anything new. Marriages happen on Akshaya Tritiya, investments, purchasing land, purchasing gold, any kind of new beginning. And especially any kind of pious activity is always encouraged and enjoined, in fact, in the scriptures we'll hear in a moment. So it's particularly said that whatever we do on Akshaya Tritiya confers permanent results. And if Akshaya Tritiya happens to fall on a Monday, that's considered to be even more auspicious. The general character of Akshaya Tritiya we can hear from Hari Bhakti Vilas. This is the 14th Vilas and texts 405 to 413. Ata Visheshatas Tatra Akshaya Tritiya Krityam Adau Tan Mahatmyam. So Sanatan Goswami or Gopal Bhatta Goswami is giving some glories of Akshaya Tritiya, and whatever we speak, we have to make sure that whatever we speak is upheld by Shabda Pramana. That is to say, the assertion of our authorities. Who are those authorities? Shastra Yonidvat. Everything begins from Shastra. That is the number one authority. But Shastra cannot exist independent of the time and place and circumstance for which it was intended, or independent of those who actually represent its ideals. And so we have to have Shastra as well as Sadhu, which means the entire Guru Parampara, as well as the community of devotees, and ultimately the bona fide spiritual master, Guru. In that case, in our case, in ISKCON, everyone's Guru is His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So, why am I saying this? Because in this particular passage of Hari Bhakti Vilas, Sanatan Goswami is immediately giving a scriptural reference in order to make his point. It's exactly the same modus operandi, if you will, that we get from Srila Rupa Goswami, his younger brother, who wrote Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu in the same way. He makes an assertion, and then he backs up his assertion with all the references. So, Matsye, in the Matsya Purana, he's quoting now, Vaishakhe Masi Shuklayam Tritiyayam Janardhanaha Yavan Utpadayam Nasa Yugamcha Kritavan Kritam That means the Supreme Lord is the benefactor of all kinds of living entities. He's producing food, grains, and etc. on the third day of the fortnight of the waxing moon in the month of Vaishakha. Is this Akshaya Tritiya. Brahmalokat Tripatagam Prithivyam Avatar Yayatasyam Karyo Yavair Homo Yavair Vishnum Samarshayet. Looks like the Sanskrit is a little messed up here. But the idea is that the Lord also caused the Ganges, which consists of the three streams, to appear within this world on this day by descending from Brahmaloka. On the auspicious day of the Ganges appearance, one should perform a fire sacrifice by offering barley as an oblation, and one should also worship Lord Vishnu by offering him the same. Yavan dadyat vijatibhyah prayataha prasayedvayam. One should also give this grains in charity to the Brahmanas and give them in particular food that is prepared with barley. Padmecha Shri Varaha Dharani Samvade. This is a conversation in the Padma Purana between Lord Shri Varaha, that means Lakshmi Varaha, and Dharani, Dharani meaning the earth planet. He says, Tretayugam Tritiyayam Shuklayam Masi Madhave Pravittan Chatrayi Dharmaha Pravittaste Pravartitaha. On the third day of the fortnight of the waxing moon in the month of Vaishakha, the Treta Yuga, the Vedas, religious principles, and the path of increasing material attachment, that's called Trayi Dharma, were all inaugurated. Trayi Dharma means, in most cases, people are not ready to seek liberation immediately. In most cases, people need to be prepared by having some concept of dharma and by having some facilities with which to work, that's called artha, and by having some desire to fulfill, some purpose, that's called kama. So these are the things that we invest in the process of Krishna consciousness. So it's not really, it is germane to our ends as well. It's something like saying that it's not very likely that a person can understand the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam without having studied the previous 9 cantos. And it's also worth noting that the previous 9 cantos contain these very things. There's a lot of discussion about fruitive activities. There's a lot of discussion about cultivation of knowledge. There's a lot of discussion about mystic yoga, etc., etc. So anyway, here this Sanatana Goswami is telling us that on this Akshaya Tritiya day, all these things were inaugurated. Moreover, Akshaya Shochete Loke Tritiya Harivallabha Snane Danerchane Shraddhe Jape Purvajatarpane Yerchayanti Avair Vishnum Shraddham Purvanti Yatnataha Tasyam Dadati Danani Dhanyaste Vaishnava Nara. On this particular third day of the fortnight, it's very dear to Lord Hari. It's called Hari Vallabha. It's known as Akshaya Tritiya. Whatever pious act one performs on this day, such as taking a holy bath, giving in charity, offering oblations, or chanting mantras, awards an inexhaustible result. Those who worship Lord Vishnu by offering him barley on this day and who perform the Shraddha ceremony to the forefathers are certainly recognized as devotees of Lord Vishnu, and thus their lives are glorious. It's not absolutely necessary to do all these things, but Krishna himself in Bhagavad Gita chapter 7, text number 28, affirms that Krishna consciousness is a lot easier if we have some background in pious activities such as this. He says, Yesham tuantagatam papam Jananam punya karmanam te dvanva mohan mukta bhajante mam dridha vritaha. Those devotees who find that they're able to muster a mature commitment and sustained commitment to Krishna consciousness, in every case, practically speaking, you will see that they have already been relieved of so many illusions. Dvanva moha, the illusions of duality in this mature world, they've already been freed from that. How? Through piety. The understanding given by our acharyas especially in the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, is that by pious activities, fruitive activities, according to Vedic injunction, one develops the adhikar, or the qualification, or the prerogative, if you will, for cultivating spiritual knowledge, atma gyan, understanding of the spirit, soul. In other words, spiritual realization. And on that basis, we take to Krishna consciousness. Brahma, what is that? Chapter 18. Brahma bhuto prasannatma nashochiti nakangshati ityadi. So anyway, this is the point. Therefore, all these things are there in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and therefore they're mentioned here. And if you want extra credit, or you want to get in the fast lane, then do all these things on Akshaya Tritiya. That's considered to be very auspicious. And in fact, this day is dear to Lord Vishnu. Hari Vallabha. So he goes on to say, Atha Shukla Saptami. Yes, so that's a different topic. So we'll stop there, but that's what he says about Akshaya Tritiya in the Hari Bhakti Vilas. We find that Srimad Bhagavatam 7th canto, chapter 14, text number 21, Srila Prabhupada also, this is one of the rare occurrences where you can find something about Akshaya Tritiya in his books. He's translating that verse, which mentions that Akshaya Tritiya is also a good day to perform Shraddha ceremony to your forefathers, if you're to do that. So this is something we've heard already in the Hari Bhakti Vilas, but it's confirmed by Srimad Bhagavatam. Interesting verse is found in the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 69, text number 34. That context is Narad Muni wandering around in Dwarka, visiting one palace after another of Lord Krishna. Krishna has expanded into thousands of Dwarkadhish forms, and he has supplied thousands of such equally opulent palaces to all of his queens, just to please them. They're his pure devotees in Swakiya Rasa. So that verse says, Yajantam sakalam devan kwapi kratubhirujjitahaihi urtayantam kvachid dharmam urparamam mahadibhihi. Somewhere, Krishna was worshipping all the demigods with elaborate sacrifices. That is to say, in one palace, that's what he's doing. Sakalam devan yajantam, Krishna. Somewhere else, he was fulfilling his religious obligations by doing public welfare work, such as construction of wells and public parks and monasteries and such things as that. There's no BBT purport to that verse, but Jiva Goswami has given in his commentary that Krishna worshipped his expansions, his own expansions. Who are they? The Devatas, in deity form. And he worshipped the Vaishnavas directly, Sakalan Devan, by elaborate sacrifices and worship. In other words, the Lord is known as Bhaktavatsala. He likes to worship his own devotees. And this is something we see from time to time throughout the Shastras. Moreover, Krishna performed actions of purti, piety. Sometimes in this verse, we have a different reading. Instead of matadibhi, which means Krishna was constructing ashrams, the word is used alayadibhi, which means temples. Temples are sometimes called devalaya. If you go to Mauritius, even today, every temple, even if it's Lord Vishnu's temple, it's called what? Shivalaya, the abode of Lord Shiva, because people in general are not able to make much distinction. But anyway, Devalaya means a temple. And Vishwanath Chakravarti, what does this have to do with Akshaya Tritiya? That's the question. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has given in his commentary that sometimes Krishna would worship demigods during Chaitya spring, Chaturmasya, that's the rainy season, and other auspicious holy days or auspicious months, like today's a holy day, Akshaya Tritiya. I'm sorry, 2 weeks from now we'll have Akshaya Tritiya, but we're talking about it today. At other times, such as the day commemorating the beginning of a yuga, such as Akshaya Tritiya, this is he's saying explicitly here, which marks the start of Treta Yuga, Krishna would perform works of public piety, such as digging wells for drinking water. So this is how the Lord acts in such a way as to instruct ordinary people how to make advancement in human life. Most people, they actually require to be engaged in some indirect way because they're just not interested in Krishna consciousness. So for those people, Krishna has to set a proper example as much as possible, but not as much as Ram, because Krishna is called Prema Purushottam. His real focus and his real interest is in nurturing those devotees who are really interested in bhakti. Usually Ram is the one who takes care of the people who are only interested in dharma, artha, kama, maybe moksha. And Krishna is interested in prema pum artho mahan, that goal of human life which is beyond all four things, beyond dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. So anyway, Krishna was showing this example in Dwarka because as Dwarkadish, which is Vasudev Krishna, he sets this example for everyone. Okay, so now many times we see that Akshaya Tritiya is also connected to the story of Draupadi feeding Krishna from her Akshaya Patra, her endless pot, if you will, inexhaustible pot. That's a story from Mahabharata, that during their exile in the forest, the Pandavas, they often went hungry, because what do you do in the forest, especially if you're Kshatriya used to eating all kinds of delicacies? It's not an easy thing, especially if you're Bhima. So due to lack of food, they were often hungry, and Draupadi in particular, as their wife, was also anxious not only for them, but if we have guests, we have to receive them, because Atiti Devo Bhava. The Upanishads tell us, Shruti Mantra says that someone who appears at your doorstep has to be treated like God. So she was anxious because she couldn't properly receive any guests who happened to appear, even though they were in the forest. She saw it as a duty. Maharaj Yudhishthira prayed to Lord Surya Narayana, according to Mahabharata, and the sun god gave him a bowl that would remain filled as long as Draupadi had finished serving all their guests and had not yet eaten herself. So Krishna gave her the benediction that her Akshaya Patra would always be filled with the foodstuffs of their choice and in as much quantity as needed to satiate the whole universe as need be. Bilvamangala Thakur, famous Vaishnava poet, he has also prayed in his Govinda Damodar Stotram, Durvasa Sovakyamupetya Krishna Sacha Bravit Kanana Vasinisham Anta Pravishtam Manasa Juhava Govinda Damodara Madhaveti. Somehow or other, Draupadi accepted Durvasa Muni's order that she feed his thousands of disciples, even though she had no way to do so. And then turned her attention to the Lord within her heart, the Lord of the forest dwellers like her, and she mentally addressed him as Govinda, Damodara, and Madhava. The word Kanana Vasini, that means that she and the Pandavas were exiled and living in the forest. They were doing their vanavas, as we say. Draupadi had received that pot from the sun god, And one day after Draupadi had already finished feeding everyone and she finally ate herself, then one day Duryodhana had instigated Durvasa Muni and his thousands of disciples to just show up, because he knew very well Duryodhana. This is why he's called Duryodhana instead of Suyodhana. Duryodhana means, he's bad character. And he fights dirty, we can say. So he was doing like this. He was very treacherous, conniving sort of behavior. He sent them all to Draupadi, knowing that it was going to put her in a huge problem, because Durvasa Muni was also famous for his anger. He would get irascible. And thousands of sages, somebody's going to have to be offended. It's almost guaranteed. So he was trying to set her up, actually, for this offense. So then Durvasa Muni and all of his disciples, they all showed up. And they said, we're really hungry. And Draupadi said, we'll try to put something together for you. Meanwhile, she's in her heart, she's praying, Govinda Damodar Madhava, you got to help me out. So they want to take their bath. And while they were bathing, Krishna shows up, because Krishna heard her prayer. And Krishna said, if you got anything at all, check that pot. Is there even a little bit of whatever stuck to the pot still? She found something and he put that in his mouth and he said, I'm so happy with this. So as the Shastras tell us, Yasmin tushte jagat tushtam. When Krishna is satisfied, the whole universe becomes satisfied. And so similarly, when Krishna was satisfied and said so, from within, Durvasa Muni and all of his disciples or associates, they were all suddenly, they felt full and they didn't want to eat anything at all. Prabhupada discusses this in his purport to text 1.15.11 of the Srimad Bhagavatam. When the devotees are put into difficulty, they have an opportunity to recollect the Lord with rapt attention. So Draupadi was thinking of Lord Krishna in that dangerous position, and the all-pervading Lord could at once know the dangerous position of his devotees, end quote. Hearing Draupadi's appeal, Krishna arrived, as we've discussed. And so Durvasa Muni, they couldn't imagine going to eat. So somehow or other they felt embarrassed. They got out of the situation and Draupadi was saved in this way by Krishna's kind and inimitable intervention. Bhaktavatsala Bhagavan Shri Krishna ki jai. So Draupadi was saved from offending that irascible sage. Now in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Srila Goswami says, this pastime actually provides an instance or an example of how Krishna is omniscient. If we take shelter of Krishna, don't think he's not hearing your prayers. Just because you can't see what he's doing doesn't mean he's not responding. He always responds 100%. So that pastime is meant to strengthen our faith like this. Akshaya Tritiya is also said to be the day that Lord Parashuram appeared. Lord Parashuram, of course, is the martial incarnation of the Lord, you can say. In fact, not only did he incarnate and chastise 21 generations of corrupt politicians and administrators, but it's said that he created the entire coastal area of what we call modern-day Kerala in southwest India, from Gokarna all the way to Kanyakumari. He shot an arrow into the ocean, and as far as that arrow went, that far the ocean receded, and he moved in and he colonized with so many Brahmins. And still to this day, although the Christians are trying hard and the Muslims are trying even harder to wipe out the civilization, and so are the Marxists, but still there's quite a strong Brahminical culture there, and you can see it in places like Guruvayur and other places. Many tirthas are there. In fact, Parashurama's own kshetra is there in Trishur, if I'm not mistaken. His headquarters was at the Vadagunatha temple. So other legends say that Akshaya Tritiya is the day that Vyasadeva began dictating Mahabharata to Lord Ganesh. We all know the story. That the arrangement was that Ganesh will keep writing as long as Vyasa is speaking. So Vyasa cannot stop, and Ganesh will not stop. And in this way, we have the Mahabharata by the cooperative efforts. Just see with the power of cooperation amongst devotees. Cooperation between Ganapati, who was also a devotee, and Vyasadeva, who was also acting as a devotee. That's given us this great gem known as Mahabharata, by which any of us know what to do, how to do it, when to act, when not to act, what to do, etc. Ganga Devi, we've already heard from Hari Bhakti Vilas. This is the day that Ganga Devi descended to the earth in the form of river Ganges. On this day every year, after a long snowy winter, both Gangotri and Yamunotri open up again, and people can come and visit those places and offer their worship to Ganges and to Yamuna, respectively. Sudama Vipra, Sudama the poor Brahmin, is said to have gone to Dwarka to visit Dwarkadish, his friend Krishna, on this day. And all he could muster to bring, because he was starving himself, was a few grains of chipped rice, and so he brought those. And in fact, once he got there and was astonished to see the unbelievable opulence of Dwarka, just wandering around like Narad Muni, who saw all these different palaces, and Krishna doing different things in each of them. This poor Brahmin Sudama was just completely astonished to see the incredible opulence of the Lord. And so he was actually too ashamed even to think of giving what he brought. But Krishna asked him for it. Krishna pointed, what is that you've tied up in your paw? Let me have some of that. Sudama saying, no, not for you. And Krishna said, no, I want it. And Krishna forcibly snatched it from him. And he started eating it. Krishna, oh, very nice, very nice. Krishna received and worshipped this poor Brahmin. Just as we said in the beginning, just as Narad Muni witnessed Krishna worshiping even demigods to show his respect. So he put this Brahmin on his own bedstead, had his own wife fanning and serving him and feeding him. And then he washed the Brahmin's feet and he sprinkled it on his own head. Even Rishabhadev says that the water which is washed the lotus feet of the Brahmins is the most auspicious thing by which I get my power. This is the Lord's character. So Sudama was too ashamed even to give this thing, and somehow or other he got out, he finished with his friend, and he was on his way home. He didn't ask anything of the Lord. He didn't offer anything to the Lord. The Lord stole it from him. But when he came home, he had a hard time finding his jhompadi, his hovel. And he was looking around, and then his wife sent out all of her servants. Where did a poor Brahmin's wife get a fleet of servants? They all materialized out of nowhere. Big palace, so many cows, so many servants, so much grains, so much opulence. Suddenly and Sudama could instantly understand this is all coming from Krishna, because this is all looking very much like what I saw in Dwarka. So this also is said to have happened on Akshaya Tritiya day. The god of fortune himself, if there is one, the treasurer of heaven, I mean to say, Kuvera, is said to have been appointed into his position on this day as well. That's maybe why people all go to buy gold on Akshaya Tritiya. The construction of the chariots for the Lord Jagannath's Rath Yatra at Puri, that begins also on this day. And on this day of Akshaya Tritiya, one day out of the year, in the Banki Vihari temple in Vrindavan, here you can see the pujaris showing the lotus feet of the deity, which is usually not able to see. Several temples are doing like this. At Kumbhakonam, all the big temples in the city, such as Sarangapani Vishnu Temple, They all bring, all the Utsava Murtis come out, and there's a big procession through the town. And people come and offer their worship and respects and prayers to the Lord in full devotion. In Andhra Pradesh, famous temple of Varaha Lakshmi Narasimha Swami in Vishakhapatnam, Singhachalam, just nearby to Vishakhapatnam. They observe special rituals on that day according to their Sthala Purana, which describes many things, that ancient things, and which is also is consistent with Vishnu Purana and Srimad Bhagavatam. Excuse me, the deity of Lakshmi, Varaha, Narasimha, and the place and the temple, they're all described. Sorry. In this temple of Singhachalam, most of the time you go to this temple, the deity looks like a big, huge Shivalinga, 3 foot high Shivalinga, yellow, because the actual deity is completely covered with chandan. Many, many years ago, the legend holds, tradition holds, that King Pururava, he somehow discovered this deity within an anthill. And at that time, the king heard this divine command: you establish a temple here and worship me in this form, but keep me always covered with chandan, sandalwood. So they do that. 364 days out of the year, there is no darshan. They have actually 2 forms. There's what they call the Nityarupa and the Nijarupa. Nityarupa means this Shivalinga looking thing. Chandan, big mound of chandan under which the deity is situated. And Nijarupa means the actual form of the deity, which you can hardly see. But on Akshaya Tritiya every year, they remove all this chandan. That process takes at least a couple of hours. And for at least several hours in one day only out of the year, throngs and throngs, millions, maybe thousands, at least hundreds and thousands of people are coming to see the deity in Singhachalam, even today. And this is such an ancient tradition that there are archaeological and epigraphic records that show many persons in the past also donating for this big festival. We don't know whether it was bigger in the past or bigger now, but it's certainly been going on for a long time. Singhachalam. Anyone from Andhra Pradesh already knows about Singhachalam. It's probably the biggest temple in the state. So that also happened on Akshaya Tritiya. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, of course, he also went there later on. So this is Akshaya Tritiya. Many things. The same day is well known for so many things. All right, so Chandan Yatra. Chandan, of course, means sandalwood paste. Yatra means a celebration or a train of people going somewhere, pilgrimage, journey. The word ya, dhatu in Sanskrit, that means to go somewhere. So yatra, where you go. So today's Chandan Yatra, Sandalwood Festival, you can say. We know from Jayadev Goswami in Geet Govindam, Chandana Charchita Neela Kalevara, Pita Vasana Vanamali. He's describing Krishna like this. Krishna is dressed in yellow silken cloth. He's wearing a garland of forest flowers. He has his beautiful blue complexion, and that his forehead and other places are decorated with brilliant yellow chandan, bright yellow sandalwood paste. Actually, the word chandan itself comes from the verbal root chand, which means to shine or to be bright. That's why the pujaris mix always the chandan with saffron to make this beautiful yellow color, and other things as well, gorochana, other pigments. So bright yellow against the beautiful bluish complexion of Lord Krishna, it's extremely beautiful. So Jayadev Goswami has glorified that. In the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 27, text 30 and 31, we also find the injunction is there. Krishna is explaining to Uddhava that devotees should bathe the deity every day. And as opulently as assets permit, we should use scented water, and we should offer sandalwood paste, and we should offer ushira root, camphor, kumkum, aguru, other fragrant substances, chanting various Vedic hymns, such as Purusha Sukta, Samaveda, etc., etc., etc. So that's an injunction also from the 11th canto. Especially in Vrindavan and also in eastern side of India, many temples are celebrating this traditional festival in which the Lord is worshipped with sandal paste, because it starts to get hot in April and especially in May. It's very, very hot. And so the chandan is very cooling because sandalwood has this cooling effect, famous for that, to relieve the heat of the summer season. So devotees are making massive amounts of chandan. You will see them if you come to Vrindavan at this time of year. As devotees are sitting, well, nowadays the crowds are so heavy in Vrindavan, it's hard to see anything happening. But still they're there, the devotees are coming and they're grinding massive amounts of chandan. And on Akshaya Tritiya day in particular, since these days are kind of overlapped, these festivals are overlapped, then the Lord, the entire body of the deity is covered in chandan. His jewelry chandan, his clothes chandan, his bodily limbs, all chandan, everything, head to toe. It's really quite a sight. And several temples in Vrindavan actually are worshiping like this. But we find it's particularly prominent in Odisha, many of the temples there, in the Jagannath Puri temple and also in the Sakshi Gopal temple. It's called Gandhalepa Nyatra as well, smearing scented substances. And in Puri, in most places, this festival continues for 21 days, 3 weeks. But in Jagannath Puri, it continues for 6 weeks, 42 days. Has two parts: internal Chandan Yatra and external Chandan Yatra. Internal Chandan Yatra means they do so many things within the temple, only nobody can see them. But external Chandan Yatra, around this time of year, around Akshaya Tritiya, the Lord comes out of the temple for 21 days. And where does he go? He goes to the Narendra Sarovar, big tank just near the Jagannath temple. And we can read about this actually, even in the Chaitanya Charitamrita and other Vaishnava literatures. For at least 500 years, this thing has been going on every year, Chandan Yatra, very famous. So decorated boats, deities come and they ride in decorated boats within the Narendra Sarovar. As we mentioned, the Rath Yatra festival chariots, they're also starting to be constructed at the same time. So all these things are going on there in Jagannath Puri. And Madhya Leela of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, chapter 4, describes this at length, particularly Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes in Jagannath Puri during the Chandan Yatra at Narendra Sarovar and other places. Similar pastimes are described in Chaitanya Bhagavata, Antyakhanda, chapter 8. Today we can just take a brief look at texts 102 to text 142. There we hear that Krishna, excuse me, Krishna, Balaram, and Vijaya Vigraha Govinda, they all arrived at Narendra Sarovar for performing water sports. That is to say, Lord Jagannath, his brother, and the Utsava Murti, who is known as Govinda in Jagannath Puri. They all come to Narendra Sarovar at this time. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur explains in his notes He quotes from Skanda Purana, Utkalakhanda, chapter 29. Vaishakhya site pakshe tritiyakshaya samyika tatramam lepaye gantha lepanayer adishobhana. This is again back to Akshaya Tritiya. The injunction is, smear fragrant sandalwood paste on my body on the day of Akshaya Tritiya during the waxing moon in the month of Vaishakha. End quote. So, Sri Purushottama Deva ordered his servant, the exalted Vaishnava named Sri Indradyumna Deva, to smear fragrant sandalwood paste on his body on this day, Akshaya Tritiya day, during the waxing moon in the month of Vaishakha. Following this, even today, Lord Jagannath's Vijaya Vigraha, Sri Madan Mohan, is brought on a palanquin from the temple to Sri Narendra Sarovar every day, from Akshaya Tritiya in Vaishakha up to the 8th day of the waning moon in Jyeshtha, next month. Sri Madan Mohan Deva enjoys these boat pastimes in the lake along with his ministers, headed by Lokanath and Mahadev, Lord Shiva. Since the Chandan Yatra festival of Sri Madan Mohan is held in Sri Narendra Sarovar, the lake is called Chandana Pukur or Chandan Pond. The phrase Sri Yatra refers to the Chandan Yatra. That's his comment. Now we go to text 103. There was a tumultuous vibration of the chanting of the Lord's holy names, mixed with the sounds of mridangas, conch shells, kettle drums, and other large drums.
Prabhu,
Yep.
Prabhu, could you kindly speak the Bengali verse?
Okay, yeah, I thought you'd ask for that. You have to excuse me also because it's a little difficult for me to breathe. It's, after all, April in Vrindavan, and that means asthma for those who are sensitive. Okay, so Sahasra Chatra Pataka Chamara Chaturdike Shobha Kore Parama Sundar. The scene was beautified with thousands of umbrellas, flags, and chamaras on all sides. Maha Jaya Jaya Shabda Maha Haritwani Ihavayar Kon Shabda Nahi Shuni. No one could hear any sound other than the loud chanting of Jai, Jai, and Hari, Hari. Rama Krishna Govinda Mahakutu Hare Uttarila Shishave Narendra Rakule. In this way, Balaram, Krishna, and Govinda Vijaya Vigraha were brought to the bank of Narendra Sarovar with great pomp. Jagannatha Goshti Sri Chaitanya Goshti Shange Mishaila Tana O Budila Shankirtane. The associates of Lord Jagannath and the associates of Lord Chaitanya mixed together, and everyone forgot themselves in the ecstasy of Sankirtana. Dui Goshte Hai Ki Haila Ananda Ki Vaikuntha Shukashi Haila Murtimanta. Such happiness was expressed when the two groups joined together that it seemed as if the happiness of Vaikuntha had appeared in person, personified happiness. Chaturdike Lokerananda Antanai Shabkarena Karayena Chaitanya Goshai. Lord Chaitanya personally enjoyed endless happiness and distributed that happiness to everyone in the four directions. Ramakrishna Sri Govinda Uchila Naukai Chaturdige Bhaktagana Chamara Hulai. Balaram, Krishna, and Govinda were then placed in a boat, while devotees on all sides fanned them with chamaras. Ramakrishna Sri Govinda Naukai Vijay Dekhya Shantosha Sri Gauranga Mahashai. Lord Gauranga felt satisfied on seeing the boat festival of Balaram, Krishna, and Govinda. Prabhu Oshakala Bhaktalai Kutuhale Champadiya Padile Nanorendre Jale. Then the Lord and his devotees all jumped into the waters of Narendra Sarovar. Shuno bhai, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Avatar Jai Rupe Narendra Jale Karila Vihar. Oh, my dear brothers, now hear the pastimes performed by Sri Krishna Chaitanya in the waters of Dhanendra Sarovar. Ve Jamunai Jaina Shishugana Medi Mandali Haya Korinain Jalakedi. Previously, the Lord and his cowherd boyfriends formed circles and enjoyed water sports in the Yamuna. Shai Rupe Shakala Vaishnava Ganamedi Parashpara Kore Dhari Haila Mandali. In the same way, the Lord and his devotees now formed circles in the water by holding each other's hands. Gauda Deshe Jalakeli Ache Kayaname She Jalakriyaran Vilen Prathame. They began their water sports with a well-known Bengali water sport named Kaya. Kaya Kaya Boli Karatali Deno Jale. Jale Vajayena Vaishnava Shakale. The Vaishnavas called out, Kaya, Kaya, and they clapped their hands in the water and produced musical sounds by hitting the water in a particular way. Gokulera Shishubhav, Hailo Shavar, Prabhu O Hailo Gokulendra Avatar. The devotees became absorbed in the mood of the cowherd boys of Gokula, and the Lord accepted the mood of Krishna, the Lord of Gokula. Bahyonahi karo shabe ananda vipala, nirbhai ishwara dehe shabe dena jag. Overwhelmed with ecstasy, the devotees forgot everything and fearlessly splashed water on the Lord. Advaita Chaitanya duhe jala phela pheli, Rathame lagila duhe mahakutu hari. Lord Chaitanya and Advaita Acharya began by splashing water in great sport on each other. Advaita Khare Nakshare Kshane Vaishwar Nirghata Nayane Jala Dena Parashpar. While forcefully splashing water in the eyes of each other, sometimes Advaita would be defeated, and the next moment, the Lord would be defeated. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur gives a small note here. The word nirghata means very forcefully or vigorously. Nityananda Gadadhar Shipuri Gosai Jane Jalajutha Karo Harinai. Nityanand Prabhu, Gadadhar, and Puri Gosai all began water fights with one another, and yet none of them were defeated. Datte Gupte Jala Yutha Lage Barabar Paranande Dui Jane Korena Hunkar. Mukunda Dutta and Murari Gupta had repeated water fights in which they shouted loudly in ecstasy. Dui Shaka Vidyanidhi Sharup Damodara Ashiyananda Jala Dena Parashpar. The two friends, Pundarika Vidyanidhi and Sarup Damodar, smiled as they splashed water on each other in ecstasy. Srivasa Sri Rama Haridasa Vakreshwara Gangadasha Gopinath Sri Chandra Shekhar Eimatanya Dehna Shabar Jal Chaitanya Ullasa Shabe Hailo Vipal. Sorry. Srivas, Sri Ram, Haridas, Vakreshwar, Gangadas, Gopinath, and Chandrasekhar all became overwhelmed in the ecstasy of Lord Chaitanya's pastimes as they splashed water on one another. Shri Govinda Rama Krishna Vijaya Naukai Lakha Lakha Loka Jale Harite Vedai. Hundreds of thousands of people in the water took great pleasure as Balaram, Krishna, and Govinda, the Vijaya Vigraha, rode in a boat. Shri Jale Vishayi Shanyashi Brahmachari Shaveyananda Bhashe Jalapira Kari. Sannyasis, brahmacharis, and householders all sported in the waters of Narendra Sarovar and floated in waves of bliss. The word Vishayi refers to materially attached persons in the Grahastha ashrama. Even they were included in this pastime. Just see. Eno she chaitanya maya she sthani ashite karon shakti nahite napai dekhite. The influence of Lord Chaitanya is such that less fortunate persons could neither see nor enter that place. Himata jala krida ranga kutuhale karina ishvara shange vaishnava shakade. In this way, all the Vaishnavas enjoyed sporting in the water with the Lord. Purvajena jala krida hailo jamunai shesha bhaktalai Shri Chaitanya Rai. Lord Chaitanya and his associates enjoyed the same water sports as they had previously enjoyed in the Yamuna. Jai prashada pailena jahnavi jamuna narendra jalero hai shai bhagyashima. The same mercy attained by the Ganges and the Yamuna was now attained by Narendra Sarovar. Eishakala dila jiva uddhare karane. All these pastimes were performed to deliver the living entities. By hearing and studying these topics, one's bondage to fruitive activities is destroyed. Tave Prabhu Jala Krida Shampana Kariya Jagannatha Dekhi Chalila Shabalaya. After finishing his water sports, Lord Chaitanya went with his devotees to see Lord Jagannath. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. And this is the conclusion of that section of the description of the Chandan Yatra. This was Chaitanya Bhagavata, Antyakhanda, chapter 8, or right around text 102 or so it begins. Okay, so we're out of time, but if anybody maybe has any questions or any comments on anything we've discussed so far, we can maybe continue for a few minutes.
Thank you so much, Mukunda Datta Prabhu. It is a wonderful, sweet. I wish we were there with the Lord there on those wonderful pastimes.
We are there by hearing.
And I'm here in your place, His Holiness Samara's place. I'm in Dallas. I'm getting the bliss. I can feel the energy and His mercy in Sri Radha Kalachandri Dham.
Okay, we have a couple of hands up.
Yeah,
You call.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Please accept my humble obeisance. All praise to Prabhupada. Prabhu, my question is regarding truth. You had mentioned that Shabda Praman is the source of everything. And we also learn that Shabda Praman is absolute. And then, of course, it comes down through the disciplic succession of gurus and sadhus. Then you also mentioned, Prabhu, of Shabda Praman according to time, place, circumstances. In my mind, when we bring time, place, circumstances, it's something like a perception of the Shabda Praman. For example, sun is sun, but depending on where we are, it's either dawn or noon or dusk. But that's our perception. So how do we understand Shabda Praman as it is? So if it is, I hope I'm not being offensive, if it's coming down from the disciplic succession, then is that relative to where, according to time, place, and circumstances, they appeared? Because this becomes relative then. So how do we understand absolute truth?
That's a very good question. It's a very deep question. Maybe I can try to rephrase it. We're hearing authoritative assertions from Shabda Praman, which comes in these three or four forms, depending on which source you're hearing from. The Shastras, the Sadhus, Gurus, In the 11th canto, Krishna also adds Aitihyam as a fourth source with which we can understand our situation as well as the absolute situation. Now, what happens when the pure rainwater hits the ground, so to speak? Does it become muddy? I think that's what you're asking, in effect, if you catch my analogy.
Yes, Prabhuji.
So our own perception is, of course, colored. And so we are habituated, in fact, to interpreting whatever we hear from the spiritual master. And the spiritual master is pretty much the most explicit, arbiter of absolute truth that we can have in this world. And we're very fortunate if we have the physical association of the spiritual master, because that allows us to inquire submissively as well as to render service. And by doing those things, we should have most of our doubts eradicated and our questions can be cleared up. It's a real problem after the spiritual master leaves this world physically. After the Vapu Sangha is no more available, then it's more of a problem. But we can take shelter of what Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita as well as in many other places. He says, Tesham sata yuktanam bhadatam priti purvakam dadami uddhyogam tam yena mam upayanti te. If we are engaged in devotional service, then Krishna arranges to give us the enlightenment we require to perform that service. So all we really have to do at any given time is surrender our own will to Krishna's will. That's not an easy thing. It's going to take some time. And it's a little bit like having a glass full of ink in the beginning, and you start pouring milk into that glass full glass of ink. It's all black. But as you pour milk into it, the black becomes less and less. Just keep pouring. It goes from black to dark gray, then it becomes regular gray, then light gray, and then maybe beige. And eventually, someday it will become pure milk only. No tinge of that ink will be remaining. So this is a little bit devotional service is a little bit like this. It takes us some time, most of the time, to get purified because we're not that sincere, everyone. It doesn't have to take time, but it generally does take time. That's why we were emphasizing in the beginning, and as Krishna himself emphasizes in Bhagavad Gita, the general process is punya first, then gyan second, and then liberation. And on the liberated platform, then we can actually engage in real devotional service. Until that time, there's always going to be the likelihood that we're going to contaminate anything that we hear, even from our own spiritual master. Even if we have his Vapu Sangha, we will still contaminate it because our minds are determined to do that. And that's why we are advised to constantly seek better association, to keep in the company of sincere devotees and render service in that company, because they will keep us in line as well. That's our best bet. So the combination of good association, sincere devotional service, and Krishna's mercy should carry us forward if we are trying our best. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, Prabhuji, if I may clarify one point, please. I like this example of the ink pouring milk into the ink pot. So is Shabda Praman and whatever activities we do, acts of seva, association, etc., it's just a purificatory process, because how I'm seeing it is we already have that absolute truth in us, correct? Which has just been covered with our anarthas. So all this is coming from external to clear out whatever is the contamination and reveal what we already carry within us, Satchit Ananda, the Chit part.
Yes. Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, among the first characteristics of knowledge, sattva samshuddhi. Sattva means not sattva guna. Sattva also means existence. To purify your existence. So what is your existence? It's not your spiritual existence, because your spiritual existence doesn't require purification. The existence that we need to purify is our material existence. Our mind, our body, our words, our desires, the gross material body, the subtle material body, and the activities we perform with them. These are the things that have to be regulated and purified. And that's why we have this scientific process of bhakti, in which we have so many injunctions, so many do's and do nots. We have to follow those. Srila Prabhupada said, even the little rules, they matter. Because the more strictly we follow everything that we hear from Srila Prabhupada, then the sooner we go back to Godhead. And it really is as simple as that. But it can be confusing, again, because we have very determined minds. Our minds are as determined to clutch to our sense gratification as a drug addict is determined to get his next fix by whatever means necessary. Give that some thought. So, in addition to this scientific process, we also have, I mentioned already, Shishtachara or Sadachara or Aitiham, three kind of synonymous words that all mean the same thing. How have our predecessors acted on this knowledge? How did they apply this knowledge? That is considered to be an authoritative example in itself, even when there is no explicit Shastric reference to back it up. That's the really surprising thing about that. Tradition itself is as authoritative as Shastra when it is clearly an ancient tradition and without any obvious motive, obviously, and when it is understood as being dharma and when it is executed for the purpose of spiritual advancement. So when there's any doubt about what to do and what not to do with regards to following the spiritual master's instructions, our safest default is always to do whatever our predecessors have done, with the understanding that it was dharma. Mahajano yena gata sapanta, because the shrutis, what to speak of the smritis, even the shrutis seem to be contradictory. And one cannot really even say something until he establishes himself as an authority by differing from others. So the sorry, the Mahabharata tells us the real truth of religious principles is actually hidden within the hearts of the unadulterated pure devotees, and they're called Mahajanas. We have 12 of them in Bhakti, and they're described also in the 7th canto, I think, somewhere. So I hope that clears it up.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Okay. Bharat Saloke has a question.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you. Please accept my humble obeisances. I know I learned from Bhagavad Gita that Krishna says Janma Karma Cha Me Divyam. All his pastimes have transcendental, and they have like external meaning and internal meaning. So the external meaning of Chandan Yatra is like Krishna in Vrindavan right now is feeling very heat. So to cool his body, we apply the Chandan. Is there an internal meaning of this pastime?
Well, I mean, I can speak about the Chandan Yatra as it's celebrated in back to Singhachalam temple, because there, this King Pururava, when he had his vision of the Lord and he heard the divine command to establish the temple, the Lord told him that he's so angry that he has to keep him covered with chandan so that he doesn't get to cool down his anger. That's another external reason. Internal reason is, I mean, that we don't really make that distinction so much in devotional service. At least we don't need to make that distinction. There may be an internal purpose. Sometimes our acharyas speak like this. But when Krishna comes and tells you that he's hungry, you don't really care about what his internal purpose is or what his external purpose is. You want to get him something to eat. It's pretty simple. You have to think like a gopi. Sometimes, it's actually necessary to discriminate and to cultivate gyan and all these things in this world, just because we have to deal with such a cheating mind. But once we are really and exclusively only interested in devotional service, then it's very simple. We just receive the directions, what Krishna wants, and we do the needful to make it happen. It's that simple. I don't know if I'm answering your question or not, but I hope so.
Thank you, Prabhuji. That's good. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so anything else?
I think that's about it. I think few comments. Rajesh, Sahil,
Thank you all very much.
Love and deep knowledge. Thanks so much for taking us to the festival.
Okay, so I guess we can stop there.
Yes.
Praise to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namah.
There's Mukunda Datta Prabhu.
Jai.
Hare
Jai.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Thank
Hare
you,
Krishna.
everybody. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Sunday feast is on. Please join. Sunday feast 5:30 to 9. And next Sunday is Ekadasi, Varudhani Ekadasi, fasting from grains and beans. Well, the next Wednesday, not this Wednesday, following, I think 19th Wednesday is Gadadhar Pandit appearance day, and also it's solar eclipse in the night. I think probably whether visible or not visible, we have to see. 8:30 p.m. to much later in the night on Wednesday, next Wednesday. So those are the upcoming. And May 4th is Narsingha Chaturdasi is coming up. Please plan to be there at temple. We'll have Narsingha Chaturdasi Yajna. So, and if you like to sponsor in any way for that, please let us know. Akshaya Tritiya is being discussed April 22nd, Saturday. If you want to donate or if you want to offer any services, please contact us. And Govindas, you can place your orders, govindasnj.com. So that will end here. Thank you very much for your association. Hare Krishna. Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare